4 lab values come back on a healthy 16-year-old. 3 of them point straight at a disease that gets an operation.
And the fourth one says don't touch her.
The fourth one is the one almost nobody looks at.
Which is what makes this a good question. 3 findings agree with each other and they're all leading you somewhere wrong. One finding disagrees. And it's right.
So the skill isn't reading the panel. It's knowing which value outranks the others.
That and knowing what's physically broken. Because the question doesn't ask you to name the disease at all.
Hello, I'm Yue. This is a USMLE reasoning lab where we don't memorize answers. We build the logic until the answer has nowhere left to hide.
And I'm Maya. Today we're doing a step 1 case, and we're doing it in the order you'd meet it. Question first, options, a countdown to commit, and then we take the whole thing apart.
If a lab panel has ever talked you into the wrong diagnosis, subscribe. That's the exact failure this one is built around.
Here we go. A 16-year-old girl has routine blood work drawn before elective knee surgery, an arthroscopic repair of a torn meniscus. Nothing dramatic, pre-op labs.
Standard panel.
Standard panel. And her serum calcium comes back at 11.1 milligrams per deciliter. The reference range is 8.6 to 10.2.
That's genuinely high then, not borderline.
Above range, yes, modestly. And she feels completely well, no symptoms at all. Surgery goes ahead, no complications.
Okay, so at this point, my differential for hypercalcemia is wide open. Malignancy, hyperparathyroidism, vitamin D, thiazides, immobilization, granulomatous disease.
All still live. Let's narrow it. 3 weeks later, she comes back for follow-up. Still no symptoms. Physical exam is completely normal.
And the calcium?
11.0.
So it's not a fluke, and it's not transient. Same number, 3 weeks apart.
That makes a lot of the list much less likely. Dehydration, a lab error, a one-off. What's left is persistent hypercalcemia in someone who feels perfectly fine.
Persistent and silent. Those 2 words together are already unusual.
Hold on to that. It matters more than it looks. They ask about family. Her father was told years ago that his calcium was a little high. So was a paternal aunt.
Neither of them was ever told why.
Neither of them was ever told why.
Okay, so now it's familial. Father's side, more than one relative, showing up across generations. That looks autosomal dominant.
It does.
And familial hypercalcemia in a teenager, my brain jumps straight to the MEN syndromes. Multiple endocrine neoplasia.
Of course it does. That's a completely reasonable place to go. And the question is, counting on you going there. Next value. Intact parathyroid hormone, 68 picograms per milliliter. Reference range 15 to 65.
PTH is up. Only slightly, but it's above the range.
And what does high calcium, with a PTH that isn't suppressed, normally mean?
Primary hyperparathyroidism. If the calcium is high, PTH should be shut off. It isn't. So something is making PTH inappropriately.
That's the correct reflex. And it's the right reflex 99 times out of 100.
So, familial autosomal dominant teenager hyperparathyroidism. That's MEN, isn't it? MEN1 or MEN2A.
If the question stopped there, you'd be right. It doesn't stop there. 4 more values. And this is where the floor moves.
Go.
24-hour urinary calcium. 42 milligrams per 24 hours. That's low. And her calcium to creatinine clearance ratio is 0.006. That ratio is just the fraction of the calcium reaching her kidney that actually leaves in the urine.
Wait. Low? Her blood calcium is 11 and she is barely putting any calcium in the urine?
Barely any.
That's backwards. In hyperparathyroidism, the calcium comes out of the bone, floods the filtrate, and you get stones. High blood calcium, high urine calcium. That's the whole reason those patients form stones.
And here the blood is high and the urine is nearly empty. 2 more. Magnesium is 2.3, just above the top of the range, and 25-hydroxyvitamin D is 34, completely normal. Phosphorus normal. Creatinine normal.
Vitamin D isn't driving it. Her kidneys work, and the magnesium is drifting up alongside the calcium.
Everything that made sense 60 seconds ago just stopped making sense. Here's the question, and read it carefully, because it isn't the question you think it is.
A mutation in which of the following receptors is most likely responsible for this patient's laboratory abnormalities?
Not what's the diagnosis, not what's the next step, which kind of receptor.
Let me read the 5 options out loud. A. An intracellular receptor with a DNA binding domain. B. A membrane-bound receptor coupled with a G protein. C. A transmembrane ligand-gated ion channel. D. A transmembrane receptor with intrinsic tyrosine kinase activity. E. A transmembrane receptor that activates the Janus kinase STAT pathway.
5 receptor families. Pick the one that's broken. Pause it here if you want, or take the countdown with us.
Lock in your answer.
The answer is B. A membrane-bound receptor coupled with a G protein.
And the disease?
Familial Hypocalciuric Hypercalcemia. The gene is CaSR. The protein is the calcium-sensing receptor, and it is a G protein-coupled receptor.
Say the name again slowly, because it's doing a lot of work.
Familial, it runs in families. Hypocalciuric, low calcium in the urine. Hypercalcemic, high calcium in the blood. The name is the lab panel.
Low in the urine, high in the blood. The disease is literally named after the contradiction that confused me 30 seconds ago. Okay, but here's my problem. Even if I'd got to the diagnosis, I'm not sure I could have got to the answer. I'd have had to know which receptor family this thing belongs to.
Which is the actual skill being tested. And you don't get there by memorizing a list of which disease goes with which receptor class.
Then how?
By knowing what the receptor physically is. Its shape decides its family decides its answer. So we're going to build it. What kind of object it is, where it sits, which part of it does the work, and then the function will fall out on its own.
Structure first.
Structure first. every time. And by the end, those 4 lab values won't be 4 facts to remember. There'll be 2 consequences of 1 broken part. 3 names, and people mix them up constantly. Let's separate them. First, the gene. It's called CaSR, and it sits on the long arm of chromosome 3.
That's the instruction sheet.
That's the instruction sheet. Second, the protein it builds, the calcium-sensing receptor, written CaSR.
Hang on. Those are the same 4 letters.
They are. And out loud, they're the same word. The difference only exists on the page. The gene is written in italics with every letter capital. The protein has a small a in the middle.
Oh, that's cruel. If I'm listening rather than reading, I can't tell them apart at all.
You can't, so use the sentence instead of the spelling. A gene is a set of instructions. A protein is the thing built from them. If it's sitting in a membrane doing a job, it's the protein.
Instructions versus the machine. That I can hold on to.
Third, the family that protein belongs to, which is what the question is actually asking about. It's a class C G protein-coupled receptor.
Gene, protein, family, CaSR, CaSR. Class C GPCR.
Say that chain out loud a few times and this question is already half answered. Now, the shape. Start at the outside. Sticking out of the cell into the blood, there's a large extracellular domain, and inside it is a module shaped like 2 lobes with a cleft between them.
Like a clamshell.
The literature calls it a Venus-flytrap domain, and that's exactly the image. 2 lobes hinged with a gap in the middle. Calcium ions bind down in that gap, and the flytrap closes on them.
Hold on. The thing it binds is calcium itself? Not a hormone?
Not a hormone. A bare, naked ion. That's genuinely unusual, and it's worth sitting with for a second.
Most receptors are waiting for a molecule that some other cell made and released on purpose. This one is just measuring.
It's a meter. There's no messenger, no gland sending an instruction. The receptor reads a concentration directly. That's why it can be a thermostat for a mineral. Keep going inward. Below the flytrap, there's a cysteine-rich domain. Think of it as the drive shaft. And below that, threaded through the membrane, 7 transmembrane passes.
7. There it is.
7 is the signature. And on the inside face, a G protein is docked.
Which is option B, word for word. A membrane-bound receptor coupled with a G protein.
Ooh, word for word. One more structural fact. The receptor doesn't work alone. 2 copies join together into a dimer, linked through their extracellular domains.
So, if I inherit 1 bad copy and 1 good copy,
then some of your dimers get built from 1 good half and 1 bad half, and a bad half can drag the good one down. That's one route to dominant inheritance, and it's called a dominant negative effect.
1 root. So there's another?
There is, and it's simpler. For some mutations, half the normal amount of receptor just isn't enough to do the job. No sabotage, just not enough of it. Different mutations in this gene work differently, and I'd rather you knew that than carried one tidy story that's only half true.
Either way, 1 bad copy out of 2 and the machine comes out wrong.
Last part. On the inside, this receptor couples to GQ11 and also to GIO.
Can I flag something? Because we spent a whole episode on this. The Q in GQ isn't the name of the receptor.
Correct. And thank you, because this is the single most common mix-up in this entire area. The letters S, I, and Q name the alpha subunit of the G protein, not the receptor.
GQ means the G protein whose alpha subunit is the Q type.
Exactly that. And keep that in your pocket, because near the end of this episode, there's a disease that breaks that exact alpha subunit, and I want you to see it coming.
Noted.
Before we've said a single word about calcium physiology, we can already answer the question.
7 transmembrane passes. A G protein docked on the inside. That's a GPCR. That's B.
Ha! And notice what we didn't need. We didn't need to know what the receptor does. We didn't need the pathway. We needed the shape.
Which is the whole point of asking for a receptor class instead of a diagnosis.
Now, where is it? Because location is what turns one broken protein into 4 abnormal lab values.
Where does it live?
Honest answer first. Several places. Parathyroid glands, kidney, bone, the C cells of the thyroid, and enterocytes in the gut.
That's more than I expected.
It is, and I don't want to shrink the truth to make the story tidy. But 2 of those locations decide this question, and we're going to live in those 2.
Which 2?
The parathyroid gland and one specific segment of the kidney tubule. Location 1. The plasma membrane of the parathyroid chief cell, the cell that makes and secretes PTH.
The cell that controls calcium has a calcium meter bolted to its own surface.
Facing outward into the blood. It reads the ionized calcium going past.
That's a feedback loop with a sensor built into the effector. That's tidy.
It's the tidiest control system in endocrinology, and it's why breaking it produces such a clean, specific picture. Location 2. The kidney, specifically the thick ascending limb of the loop of Henle.
Okay. And where on that cell?
On the basolateral membrane, blood side, not the side facing the urine.
I'd have guessed the other way. It's the kidney. It's deciding what to excrete. I'd expect it to be sampling the filtrate.
And that guess is the interesting mistake, so let's sit with it. It isn't sampling the urine, it's sampling the blood.
So both organs are reading the exact same number.
That is the derivation of this entire episode. Both sensors face the blood. Both read serum calcium. So one broken gene doesn't cause a gland problem that then goes on to cause a kidney problem. It causes a gland problem and a kidney problem, side by side.
2 failures, 1 cause. Neither one downstream of the other.
Neither one downstream of the other. Remember that when we get back to the panel. Function. Parathyroid first. Calcium rises, the flytrap closes, the G protein fires, and PTH secretion is shut down.
Wait. Shut down? Activating a receptor makes the cell do less?
Less. And that's the trap, because everything you've learned so far has trained you to read receptor activated as cells switched on.
Right. Ligand binds. Cell responds. Output goes up.
Here, the output goes down. This receptor is a brake pedal, not an accelerator. Pressing it harder makes the gland quieter.
High calcium presses the brake. PTH falls. Calcium comes back down.
And low calcium releases the brake, PTH rises, calcium comes back up, that's the loop. Now break the sensor and see what happens. Our patient has one loss of function copy. The receptor is desensitized. It still detects calcium. It just needs more of it before it feels anything.
So at a calcium of 11, the gland thinks.
The gland thinks the calcium is somewhere around 9, which is fine. So it doesn't press the brake.
And the PTH keeps coming.
PTH keeps coming at a calcium level where it should have stopped. And that is exactly what her panel says. PTH 68 at a calcium of 11.
It's not that the PTH is high. It's that it's high at that calcium.
That's the whole finding. Inappropriately unsuppressed. Write that phrase down. Kidney. And this needs a little plumbing first, because the mechanism here is genuinely elegant, and most people learn a shortcut version of it.
Give me the real one. I want.
The thick ascending limb reabsorbs about a quarter of all the calcium you filter, and it does it between the cells, not through them, paracellular, through the gaps in the wall, not through the wall.
Through the gaps, not through any pump or channel inside the cell.
Not in this segment, purely between the cells. Which raises an obvious question. If it's just going through gaps, what's pushing it?
Good question. Something has to drive it.
Electricity. Here's the setup. There's a transporter on the urine side called NKCC2, the 1-furosemide blocks. It drags sodium, potassium, and 2 chlorides into the cell.
So far, that's just reabsorbing salt.
But then the potassium leaks straight back out into the urine through a channel called ROM-K, and the chloride leaves the other way, out the blood side.
Potassium goes back where it came from, and the chloride keeps going.
Which leaves the inside of the tubule with extra positive charge. The lumen becomes electrically positive.
Oh, and positive repels positive.
Calcium is a double positive. The positive lumen pushes it away, out of the urine, through the gaps between the cells, back into the blood. The voltage is the pump. There isn't a calcium pump here at all.
That's a beautiful piece of engineering. Reabsorb salt, and calcium follows for free.
Now, the gaps aren't just holes. They're lined by proteins called claudins. Claudin 16 and claudin 19 form the actual pore that calcium squeezes through.
16 and 19 are the doorway.
The doorway. And here, finally, is what our receptor actually does in the kidney. When serum calcium is high, the sensor fires and the cell makes more of a different claudin, claudin 14.
And what does 14 do?
Claudin 14 physically binds claudin 16 and blocks the pore. It's a plug.
So the receptor doesn't push calcium out. It just stops pulling it back in.
Precisely. High blood calcium, sensor fires, plug goes in, reabsorption stops, calcium leaves in the urine. And the level control on that plug runs through 2 microRNAs, microRNA 9 and microRNA 374, which normally suppress the claudin 14 gene. The receptor turns those microRNAs down, so claudin 14 goes up.
Sensor down-regulates the suppressors, so the plug gets made.
Now break the same receptor in this cell.
The kidney doesn't hear the calcium is high message properly, so the plug doesn't get made.
Not properly, And this is where I want to be careful with you. She has one working copy. So it isn't that the plug is never built and the pore is wide open. It's that the signal to build it is blunted. Less Claudin-14 than the calcium level calls for.
The pore is more open than it should be, rather than stuck open.
That's the honest version. Reabsorption stays higher than it ought to be at a calcium of 11, and calcium that should have left in the urine goes back into the blood instead.
And that's the low urine calcium.
That's the low urine calcium. And notice where it comes from. The kidney's own sensor, acting directly. It isn't PTH doing this.
So it's a second, separate failure. Same broken sensor, different organ.
Separate, yes. Though I won't pretend nothing else touches urine calcium, PTH, how much you filter, your diet and your kidney function all matter too. The point is that this arm doesn't need PTH to explain it.
Fair.
And here's the bonus. Magnesium goes through the same paracellular route driven by the same voltage through the same Claudin pore, so it gets over-reabsorbed too.
Which is her magnesium of 2.3 same pore. Or
same pore. It's a supporting clue rather than proof, because not everyone with this disease has it. But sitting next to a low urine calcium, it fits. Let's put the panel back together and watch how little of it you now have to remember.
Go one at a time.
Calcium 11, persistent, asymptomatic. The whole system now defends a higher number.
PTH 68. The gland's brake needs more calcium before it engages.
Urine calcium 42. The kidney's plug isn't being built the way that calcium level demands.
Magnesium 2.3. Same pore, same ride.
Vitamin D 34, normal, which takes vitamin D excess off the table as the driver.
And family history. One bad copy, autosomal dominant. And one bad copy is enough.
6 findings, 2 locations, 1 gene. Nothing on that list was memorized separately.
Now, I want to go back to option D, because that's where I was.
As you should. D is a transmembrane receptor with intrinsic tyrosine kinase activity, the receptor tyrosine kinases. Insulin, IGF-1, EGF, the fibroblast growth factor receptors, PDGF, VEGF, and RET.
RET is MEN2A.
RET is MEN2A, which is a gain-of-function mutation in a receptor tyrosine kinase. It's autosomal dominant, it runs in families, and here's the part that makes it dangerous. Primary hyperparathyroidism genuinely occurs in about a quarter of MEN2A patients.
It survives persistent hypercalcemia. It survives the family history. And it survives the unsuppressed PTH. 3 out of 4.
3 out of 4. It's a completely defensible answer right up until the urine calcium lands.
And then it's dead.
And here's where I'm going to slow you down, because dead is stronger than the evidence. MEN2. A hyperparathyroidism is real hyperparathyroidism. Autonomous glands and a kidney whose sensor works fine. So those patients typically put calcium into the urine.
Typically. Not always.
Not always, and this is worth knowing because exam questions live in the gap. In one large consensus review, Roughly 1 in 5 surgically confirmed hyperparathyroid patients had a clearance ratio below 0.01.
1 in 5? That's not rare at all.
It isn't. Low calcium intake, a thiazide, poor kidney function, low vitamin D. Any of those can push the urine calcium down in someone who genuinely has hyperparathyroidism.
Then, what does her ratio of 0.006 actually buy us?
It shifts the odds hard. Combine it with the rest of the picture. Lifelong, symptom-free, present in 2 relatives on one side, discovered by accident. Put together, FHH is much the better explanation. But D isn't eliminated by a single number. It's outweighed.
That's a different verb.
It's a more honest one, and the clinical picture pulls the same way. MEN2A carries medullary thyroid carcinoma and pheochromocytoma. Now, carriers can be asymptomatic for years, so they look well doesn't rule it out either.
Nothing here is a knockout. Then, it's a pile of evidence, all leaning one direction.
Which is how real diagnosis works, and it's how the good exam questions are built too.
Option A. Intracellular receptor with a DNA binding domain.
The nuclear receptors. The vitamin D receptor, glucocorticoid, thyroid hormone, estrogen, androgen. The ligand is lipid-soluble. It crosses the membrane, binds the receptor inside the cell, and the complex goes to DNA and changes transcription,
The output is gene expression.
which takes hours to days. And notice the tempting hook. Vitamin D is a calcium hormone, so A feels relevant.
Her 25-hydroxy vitamin D is normal, though. Doesn't that finish it?
It does less than people think. A normal 25-hydroxy vitamin D argues against her having taken too much vitamin D. It doesn't tell you her vitamin D receptor is fine.
Then, what kills A?
The phenotype. Break the vitamin D receptor and you get rickets. A child with bowed bones, poor growth, and calcium that is low, with the parathyroids working overtime to compensate.
Which is close to the opposite of this panel.
The opposite of this panel. That's the argument, not the vitamin D level.
Option C. Transmembrane ligand-gated ion channel.
The ionotropic receptors. Nicotinic acetylcholine, GABA-A, NMDA. The ligand binds, the pore opens, ions pour through, that's it. No second messenger, no cascade.
And that's fast.
Milliseconds. You meet them at synapses and the neuromuscular junction, though they turn up elsewhere too, and the diseases run from myasthenic syndromes to epilepsies.
But none of that is a calcium set point. I want this.
And more to the point, we already know what this receptor is. It has a flytrap on the outside and a G protein on the inside. It isn't a channel. Nothing passes through it.
And E. The JAK-STAT pathway.
Cytokine receptors. These have no kinase of their own. They borrow one. The ligand binds. The receptor recruits a Janus kinase. That kinase phosphorylates a STAT protein, and the STAT travels to the nucleus.
Which hormones?
Growth hormone, prolactin, erythropoietin, thrombopoietin, leptin, most of the interleukins.
Growth, blood, immunity.
And the diseases match growth hormone insensitivity, leptin receptor problems. None of those receptors explains this panel. And the calcium sensing receptor isn't a cytokine receptor. That's the whole of it.
Can I try to state what separates these 5? Because I don't want to carry 5 lists.
Please.
Roughly, they are sorted by speed. Ion channels, milliseconds. G protein-coupled receptors, seconds. Tyrosine kinases and JAK-STAT, minutes to hours. Nuclear receptors, hours to days.
Ooh, that's a useful shelf to put them on. And now let me put a fence around it, because I've seen this turn into a rule people trust too far.
Go ahead.
Those ranges overlap heavily. G protein-coupled receptors can produce effects that last for hours. Kinase receptors can fire in seconds. And nuclear receptors have fast, non-genomic actions that don't involve transcription at all.
So, calcium is regulated in minutes. Therefore, it must be a GPCR.
Is not a derivation, it's a hint. How fast a physiological response happens doesn't determine what a protein is shaped like.
Then, what's the actual argument for B?
The one we built in Act 3. And it doesn't need speed at all. This receptor has a flytrap outside, 7 passes through the membrane, and a G protein docked on the inside. That architecture is what option B describes.
Speed helps me remember the families. Structure is what answers the question.
Keep those in the right order and you'll never be talked out of a correct answer.
Okay, here's what's been bothering me for the last 10 minutes.
Go on.
Both organs are broken in the same direction. The gland is over-secreting PTH, and the kidney is refusing to let calcium out. Both of those push calcium up.
They do.
So why is she only at 11? Why isn't she at 16? Why isn't this a crisis?
That's the best question in this case, and answering it properly means dropping a comparison you've probably been taught. Her receptor is desensitized. It isn't dead. It still detects calcium. It just needs more of it before it responds.
The feedback hasn't gone. It's been moved.
Recalibrated. Think of a thermostat set to 26 degrees instead of 22.
The room doesn't heat forever. It heats to 26 and the heater switches off.
That's her. Calcium climbs to about 11, and at 11, even the mutant receptor feels it and eases off. The system settles at a new, higher number and holds there for life.
Right. So, primary hyperparathyroidism is the one where the feedback is gone completely.
And that's the comparison I want to take away from you, because it isn't true. Hyperparathyroidism also involves a shifted set point. Those adenomas tend to have less calcium-sensing receptor on them than a normal gland does.
Wait. So both diseases are the same lesion?
Both are a sensing problem. And there are patients whose calcium is high while their PTH sits inside the normal range. That has a name, normohormonal hyperparathyroidism, so you can't separate the two by asking, is the feedback intact?
Then what does separate them?
Where the defect lives. Hers is germline. She was born with it. It's in every cell that reads calcium, every parathyroid gland she has, and her kidney.
And an adenoma?
An adenoma is one clone of parathyroid cells that went wrong during her life. It's local. It's in the gland. Her kidney sensor is perfectly normal.
Oh, that's not a small difference at all.
Follow it through, because this is the whole case.
If the problem is only in the gland, then the kidney is still working properly.
It sees a calcium of 11, correctly decides that's too much, installs the plug, and dumps calcium into the urine. High urine calcium.
And if the problem is in the sensor itself, the kidney is broken too. It sees 11 and thinks it's 9. So it holds the calcium back.
Low urine calcium. Same blood calcium. Same unsuppressed PTH. Opposite urine.
So the urine calcium isn't testing the gland at all. It's testing whether the kidney is in on it.
Yes. That's it. That's the sentence. The urine value is how you ask, is this a local problem or a whole body problem? And it's the only value on the panel that can answer.
And that's why 3 findings agreed and 1 disagreed. The 3 were all about the gland.
All about the gland. Only 1 asked about the kidney. There's a second reason it stops at 11, and this one is just arithmetic.
Go.
Take a healthy adult first, because the numbers are cleanest there. Calcium comes in from the gut net. After what goes back out in stool, that's roughly 200 milligrams a day, and roughly the same amount leaves, mostly in urine.
In equals out. Otherwise, you'd accumulate calcium forever.
Which nobody does. Now put the FHH kidney in that adult. It still has to get rid of that daily load. It's just worse at getting rid of it.
So, to push the same amount out through a less efficient kidney,
you need a higher blood concentration to drive it. Calcium rises as far as it takes to get the day's load out the door, and then stops rising because the books balance again.
the size of the rise isn't random. It's set by how bad the kidney defect is.
Partial defect, partial rise. That's why this disease is mild.
You said, take an adult first. What changes for her?
Good, you caught the setup. She's 16. She's still building a skeleton.
Then she isn't in balance at all. She's running a surplus on purpose.
She is. Girls lay bone down fastest around 12 or 13, so at 16 she's past the peak, but she's still depositing more calcium than she loses. That's normal and healthy. So in equals out isn't exactly right for her. Its in slightly exceeds out, and the difference goes into bone she's still growing.
Does that break the argument?
It moves the balance point, it doesn't remove it. There's still a level at which her intake, her growth, and her impaired excretion settle against each other. It just isn't 0. I'd rather give you the version with the wrinkle in it than a clean one you'd have to unlearn.
Then let me push on the 42. If she's roughly in balance, she can't be excreting almost nothing forever, can she?
She can't. Over years, what leaves has to track what she takes in and doesn't put into bone. So 42 is genuinely low, but it isn't nearly 0 for life.
Is the low number itself the abnormality or not?
Both things are true. And this is worth getting right. The low 24-hour calcium is part of the phenotype. It's in the name of the disease. But on its own, it's a soft number. It moves with how much calcium you eat, how your kidneys are working, your vitamin D.
So, what does the ratio add?
The ratio asks a sharper question. Not how much calcium came out, but what fraction of the calcium that reached the kidney came out. It compares how fast she clears calcium against how fast she clears creatinine.
It's a filter normalized number. It corrects for how much was on offer in the first place.
Which is why it survives things the raw number doesn't. A healthy person carrying a calcium of 11 would be clearing a large fraction of it. She's clearing 0.000. 0.06 of it.
Low, and low in a way that a small appetite can't explain. Then, here's the other thing I keep getting stuck on. If she's holding onto calcium, she should be excreting. Where does it all end up? Does it pile up in bone? Somewhere else?
That question has a hidden assumption in it, and the assumption is the thing worth taking apart.
Which assumption?
That there's an ongoing surplus that has to be stored somewhere. There isn't one.
Say more.
Let's just measure it, because once you see the size of this, the whole question dissolves. Total body calcium in an adult is about 1,000 grams, a kilogram.
And how much of that is in bone?
Over 99%.
So, how much is actually in the extracellular fluid, the part we measure?
About 1 gram.
1 gram. Against 1,000 in the skeleton.
1,000th. Now, her calcium runs about 15% above where it would otherwise sit. 15% of 1 gram.
That's 150 milligrams.
150 milligrams. And let me say precisely what that number is, because it's easy to inflate. It is not the extra calcium in her body. It's an estimate of how much more calcium her extracellular fluid holds at 11 than it would at 9.5. One compartment, treated as one box.
It's the water in the pipes, not the water in the reservoir.
Ooh, exactly that. Now compare it to the daily traffic. Net calcium absorption in an adult was around 200 milligrams a day.
The whole step up is smaller than what moves through in a single day.
Smaller than 1 day. And set against a skeleton of 1,000 grams, it's about 15,000ths of 1%.
At that size, it's not a storage problem. There's nothing to store.
So the answer to where does it go is that the question has a false assumption inside it. It assumes a flow, a surplus, arriving every day that has to be put somewhere.
And there isn't one.
There isn't one. It's a one-time step up in a level, and then the system runs in balance again at the new level. Nobody is accumulating 150 milligrams a day. That's the part that matters, and it's the part that's solid.
Can you tell me where the 150 came from? Bone? Gut?
Honestly, not from this arithmetic. A difference between two blood concentrations tells you the size of the change. It doesn't tell you which door it came through.
You can't just say it came out of bone, then.
I can't. And I'd be making it up if I did. The rise in FHH involves the kidney holding calcium back, the gut absorbing it, and exchange with bone, all three, in proportions this calculation can't see.
Then, what re-establishes the balance?
The kidney is the organ that does the day-to-day adjusting, and at a higher blood calcium, her impaired kidney can once again clear the daily load. But long-term calcium balance is always the three of them together, kidney, gut, and bone. I don't want to hand you a single hero.
Fine. The claim that survives is no daily surplus, so nothing has to be stored.
That's the claim, and it's enough to answer your question.
So does that mean her bone just isn't releasing calcium at all?
Careful. This is a real distinction. Bone is being torn down and rebuilt every day of your life. Osteoclasts resorbing, osteoblasts depositing. That never stops in anyone.
It's not that the traffic stopped.
It's that the net movement is small. Traffic in both directions, roughly balancing, not a closed tap, and a drain running at similar rates.
And in her, specifically?
In her, At 16, the net still points into bone because she's finishing a skeleton. In an adult with this condition, it settles close to even. Either way, what you don't see is a one-way drain.
Does that show up clinically?
It does. And it's the reason this disease is treated as benign. Fracture incidence in FHH type 1 is not increased. If bone were being systematically drained for 40 years, you'd see it in the fracture numbers. You don't.
Any caveat?
1. And I'll say it rather than bury it. Fractures and osteoporosis can still happen in these patients. It isn't a promise of perfect bone. It's the absence of the systematic destruction you'd otherwise predict. Let's finish the thought by asking what doesn't happen to her, because that list is why most of these patients are left alone.
Kidney stones?
Uncommon, and the reason is structural. She isn't putting much calcium into her urine, so the usual road to a stone is mostly closed. Not never, though. Stones have been reported in this condition. Uncommon is the honest word.
Bone destruction?
Not the systematic kind. The PTH drive is mild and it's still being modulated.
Hypercalcemic crisis?
Her set point gives her a ceiling, so the calcium doesn't run away. There are other rare associations on record too, pancreatitis and chondrocalcinosis among them, so completely without consequence would be overstating it. The right summary is that the common damaging complications of hypercalcemia largely don't materialize.
Compare that with primary hyperparathyroidism.
Where does the calcium go has a very clear answer. Out of the bone and into the urine.
And that answer is the disease.
Kidney stones, chronic kidney disease, weakened bone. In hyperparathyroidism, the destination is the morbidity. In her, there is no destination doing damage, and that's why she's fine.
She has one bad copy. What happens with two?
Then you get a different disease with a different name. Neonatal severe hyperparathyroidism.
Is that just a FHH turned up?
No, and that's the important part. It isn't a worse version of the same thing. It's a different failure mode.
Because
with one bad copy, the thermostat is set wrong. With two, there's essentially no functioning sensor at all. The feedback signal doesn't come back late, it doesn't come back.
the ceiling disappears.
The ceiling disappears. And these babies, present in the first 6 months of life, usually the first days to weeks, with severe hypercalcemia, markedly elevated PTH, and enlarged parathyroid glands.
What does that actually look like in a newborn?
Dehydration from passing large volumes of urine, poor muscle tone, failure to thrive, and bone changes with fractures,
Fractures in a newborn.
including ribs. And that's the part that makes this life-threatening rather than merely severe, because a baby with broken ribs and poor muscle tone cannot breathe properly.
The respiratory failure is mechanical. It's the skeleton failing.
It's the skeleton failing. Untreated, this carried a high mortality in infancy.
And that's the same gene as our 16-year-old, who feels completely fine.
The same gene. Usually, it's a question of one bad copy versus two, though I'll add the exception, because medicine keeps them. A few particularly damaging single mutations, the sabotaging kind we talked about, can produce this severe newborn picture with only one bad copy.
So 2 copies is the usual route, not the only one.
The usual route, not a law.
Can I ask about the bone part? Earlier, you said the skeleton is 1,000 grams against 1 gram in the blood. A reservoir that big Shouldn't it protect the baby? Shouldn't it just soak the problem up?
That's a very natural thought, and there are two things wrong with it. The first one is a number.
Go on.
1,000 grams is an adult skeleton. A newborn has around 30.
Oh, 30. That's not an ocean at all.
It's a bucket. So when something starts drawing on a newborn's skeleton continuously, you can see the effect in weeks, which is exactly what happens. Demineralized bone, fractures, ribs that won't hold the chest wall.
And the second thing that's wrong?
The idea that running low would make it stop. Think about what the stop signal actually is. Falling calcium switches PTH off, but only if something can detect that the calcium has fallen.
And the detector is the thing that's broken.
The detector is the thing that's broken. So there is no level at which this baby's parathyroid glands are told to ease off. The PTH drive just continues.
It was never about how big the reservoir is. It's that nothing is watching the gauge.
That's the whole of it. Unopposed, continuous PTH acting on a small skeleton. The size of the reservoir doesn't cause the damage. It only decides how quickly you see it.
And in her case, at 16, with a full-size skeleton, 150 milligrams is invisible.
Invisible. Same tissue, completely different exposure.
So, can these children survive to adulthood?
With treatment, yes. Untreated, it carries a high mortality in infancy. This was a disease that killed babies before there was anything to offer.
What's the treatment?
Acutely, fluids and drugs to bring the calcium down, bisphosphonates. Then there's cinacalcet, a calcimimetic, which makes the calcium receptor more sensitive. The idea is to avoid or delay surgery because operating on a newborn's parathyroid glands is technically hard.
Does it work?
Sometimes, and I want to be precise rather than tidy about this. First, the evidence here is case reports and small series, not trials. This is an off-label use in a very rare disease. Second, the response depends on the genotype. There are reports of it holding the calcium normal and reports of it failing outright.
Because if there's no functioning receptor at all, making it more sensitive achieves nothing.
There has to be something left to sensitize. When it fails, surgery is the treatment.
And then they have no parathyroid glands?
Depends which operation. If a surgeon removes some tissue and leaves a remnant working, the child may keep enough parathyroid function to manage. If everything comes out, then yes, that child is permanently hypoparathyroid and needs lifelong calcium and active vitamin D.
The outcome isn't one thing. It depends how much gland is left.
It depends how much gland is left. But in the version where it all comes out, you've traded a miscalibrated automatic system for a manual one. Back to the exam for a moment. The number that separates FHH from primary hyperparathyroidism is the calcium to creatinine clearance ratio.
And the cutoffs?
Below 0.01 points to FHH. Above 0.02 points to hyperparathyroidism.
And how reliable is that?
Good enough to build an exam question on, and weaker than most people assume. I'll give you the numbers from an Endocrine Society consensus, because I'd rather you knew the edges than carried a clean rule that fails you.
Go.
A ratio below 0.01 picks up only about 65% of FHH type 1.
65. So a third of people with this disease are above the cutoff.
A third. And going the other way, about 18% of surgically confirmed hyperparathyroidism sits below it.
Then the test is nowhere near clean. Those two populations genuinely overlap.
They genuinely overlap, and no single biochemical value reliably separates these two diseases. That's the consensus position, stated plainly.
So what settles it?
A ratio at or below 0.02 is the threshold that should trigger genetic testing sequencing, CaSR, and if that's negative, GNA11 and AP2S1.
And a positive result confirms it.
A positive result confirms it. But here's the last piece of honesty. More than a quarter of people with a convincing clinical diagnosis of FHH have no identifiable mutation in any of those three genes.
A negative gene test doesn't clear them either.
It doesn't, which means the real answer to what settles it is sometimes the whole picture and time. Lifelong, stable, familial, asymptomatic. For your exam, take the cutoffs. For a patient, take the caution. One more thing, and this is the part I've been waiting for. FHH comes in 3 types.
3 different genes.
Type 1 is CaSR, the receptor. That's the one we've spent this episode on, and it's by far the commonest.
And 2?
Type 2 is GNA11, which encodes G-alpha 11.
Wait. That's the G protein. That's the alpha subunit you told me to keep in my pocket.
That's the alpha subunit. Type 2 doesn't break the sensor at all. It breaks the wire the sensor signals through.
And type 3?
Type 3 is AP2S1. That one encodes part of the machinery that pulls receptors back off the cell surface, the recycling side, not the delivery side. Break it, and the receptors' signaling and turnover go wrong.
Sensor, wire, handling. And all 3 look the same on a lab panel?
Close enough to be confused for each other, which is the striking part. Not identical, though type 3 can run more severe. So, overlapping, not interchangeable.
3 different parts of one machine. And the blood test can't tell you which one broke.
Which is structure decides function running backwards. You need the gene to know. And notice it doesn't touch our answer. Only type 1 is a mutation in a receptor, and the question asked for a receptor.
What happens if the mutation makes the receptor too sensitive instead of not sensitive enough?
Then you get the mirror image, and it has its own name: autosomal dominant hypocalcemia.
The receptor thinks there's plenty of calcium when there isn't.
It reports we're fine at a calcium of 7. PTH gets suppressed. The patient is hypocalcemic with an inappropriately low PTH, and the kidney keeps dumping calcium.
That patient is low in the blood and putting out more calcium than someone that low ever should.
Inappropriately high for the calcium they're carrying. That's the phrase. And there's a clinical trap worth one sentence. Treat that hypocalcemia hard with calcium and active vitamin D, and you're loading calcium into a kidney that's already wasting it, which raises the risk of calcium depositing in the kidney itself.
1 gene, 2 directions, 2 diseases. So practically, what happens to our 16-year-old?
In the ordinary case, nothing. She's told what she has, told it's benign, told it's lifelong, and told her children have a 50% chance of it. And then she's left alone.
No treatment at all?
For most people with this, No calcium-lowering treatment is needed. A small number do have symptoms and get managed individually, so I won't say nobody is ever treated, but the default is to leave it.
And why does getting this right matter?
Because if you call it primary hyperparathyroidism, she goes to the operating room.
And surgery doesn't fix it.
Surgery does not routinely fix it, and the reason is exactly what we built earlier. The defect isn't in the glands. It's in the sensor, and the sensor is in every gland she has left, and in her kidney.
You remove parathyroid tissue, and the calcium stays high. I want stays high.
Which is why real FHH families so often contain a relative who had a neck operation that didn't work. That's the cost of missing this. An operation on a well person for a problem the operation wasn't aimed at. One variable. Let me change one number and see if the answer moves.
Go ahead.
Same girl, same age, same family history, same calcium of 11, same PTH of 68. But a 24-hour urine calcium comes back at 320 milligrams and her clearance ratio is 0.03.
Then the kidney is behaving correctly. It sees too much calcium and it's getting rid of it. So the problem is in the gland, not the sensor.
Which moves you from FHH to genuine hyperparathyroidism. Now, does that make the answer D?
I want to say yes, because MEN2A is RET, and RET is a tyrosine kinase receptor.
Careful. Familial hyperparathyroidism in a teenager could be MEN1, it could be MEN2A, it could be familial isolated hyperparathyroidism. MEN1 is menin, a nuclear protein, not a receptor at all. None of the 5 options fits it.
Flipping the urine calcium tells me the gland is a problem, but it doesn't tell me which familial syndrome.
It doesn't. One number moved the answer off B. It didn't land it on D by itself.
Then what would?
One more finding, and it has to be a MEN2A specific one. Give her a thyroid nodule with a raised calcitonin, meaning medullary thyroid carcinoma, and now you're looking at RET.
And RET is a receptor tyrosine kinase. Now it's D.
Now it's D. And notice what that little detour taught you. The urine calcium decides sensor versus gland, and that's a lot. But it doesn't name the syndrome on its own.
One value answers one question, not every question.
Right, which is exactly the discipline these exams reward. Here's the one rule to carry out of this. High calcium with a PTH that isn't suppressed. The next value you look at is the urine calcium. Low urine calcium points to a broken sensor rather than a broken gland. That's FHH, the gene is CaSR, the protein is a G protein-coupled receptor, and most of those patients are best left alone. High urine calcium points to an autonomous gland. That's hyperparathyroidism, and that's the one that goes to surgery.
Points to, not proves.
Points to. The two overlap more than any flowchart admits, and you now know roughly by how much.
And the structure half of it?
When a question asks for a receptor class, stop trying to recall a table of diseases. Ask what the receptor physically is.
Which, for this one, is
7 passes through the membrane. A flytrap on the outside, closed around a bare calcium ion. a G protein docked on the inside. That is option B, described part by part, and it was available to you before you knew a single thing about the disease.
And the speed thing? Milliseconds, seconds, minutes, days?
Keep it as a shelf for sorting the families when you're revising. Just don't let it become the argument. Structure answers the question. Speed only helps you remember who's who.
That's the episode. If it made the panel readable instead of memorable, subscribe. There's a lot more of this coming.
And this is exam reasoning, not medical advice. See you next time.